I think it goes to the theme of the class today of experiencing. And Jean is asking the question, what do we mean by experience? Is experience a thing? We have an experience and there it is formed. Or he's suggesting that we use the word experiencing and bringing in the question of the manner of experience. And that everything hinges on this, he's saying. And of course, every week we have a very important theme and we say everything hinges on this. And last week the felt sense, everything hinges on that. And the week before we were talking about the implicit, everything hinges on that, right? The implicit realm. And then the first time interaction first, everything hinges on that. So everything hinges on all of these concepts that are interwoven. And when we get one, we sort of get all of them. And I'm hoping that we can get them in our bones in this class. And that's the important thing, not being able to say them. So before we had our attunement, my manner of experiencing was, we have technological problems and will things be able to be shared? And was kind of jittery. And then after the attunement, it's like, we're all here together. It's not just me providing something for you and technological problems getting in the way, but we're all here together. And it's this bigger, this opening out. And my manner of experiencing changed dramatically with that. Did others of you feel that? How did you experience your experience with Amona's attunement?
I enjoyed the part where she said something about being aware of everyone else with their eyes still closed, and I could just feel all of you out there in the world without seeing you. And that's what really changed my experience of being here. I was with my eyes closed in a different way.
Yes, I noticed that also.
I could feel the walls falling away when we went into a larger space, as if the space was endless and very open to anything.
I could just feel myself relax, just drain out the tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And attunement is sort of a ritual or a process or a method to help us to experience in this larger way, in this new way, open to anything, with more of ourselves than our eyes, that Rachel was saying. And when we go through that process together, we can dramatically feel the difference in how we're experiencing. So we have two tasks. We always have two tasks in this group. One is to become more familiar and at home in the language and the ways of philosophy, so that philosophy can unlock its secrets to us, right? And the other is to really look at these philosophical concepts, theoretical concepts, and practices, and how they're all united in this paper about personality change. And I thought what I would do here is make a few comments about philosophy first. What we've been doing is we've been the first half talking about philosophy, and then the second half talking about practice and seeing how they go together. I think we'll make a few preliminary remarks about philosophy and then talk about practice and then go back to philosophy. How does that sound? Sort of like a puzzle for me about how can I make this philosophy living and exciting for us so that it really changes our ways of working and our ways of thinking about our working and our ways of communicating about our working, and how can it change us? How can it change our world so that we're living in a bigger world? So it's a difficult task, as we wrote about. Amona, you had written an email that I asked you to put on the philosophy blog, but could you summarize it a little bit for us? Because we're going to start with your question here.
All right, let's see.
I think some people.
You know what I'm thinking, Lynn, what about I talk about the experience I had today instead when I was reading the client's client? Is that okay?
Sure, yes, that's very good.
Okay. Yes, because I was reading the text, the theoretically portion of the client's client today, which I have a much harder time. So I was saying the first part where it's kind of in my ears practical, I can relate it to my living and other people's living, is such a joy to read. And I get excited and I copy one quote after the other. And then I reached the theoretical part, and then it was just like getting tired and frustrated, and what does he mean, and does this even make sense? So that was 2 weeks ago, and so I read it today again, the theoretical part. And so what I realized is, first of all, there is a memory from when I was 18, and the last 2 years in school we had philosophy class. And there wasn't only frustration oftentimes, but also anger about those writers, because there was this feeling of they're making everything 100 times more complicated than it needs to be. And it's on purpose to pretend they're intelligent, and it makes no sense at all. So that's how I felt a lot of times. And so, well, I'm reading this today again. So what I noticed was, maybe 25% I got excited and made total sense. I could feel it. And then the rest has that similar feel like back then. It's like, why? I don't quite, there is nothing I resonate with. So it doesn't, it just feels like someone is finding very complicated ways of describing something where it's like, why, And so, and then there's a complete disconnect. So there is between excitement and complete disconnect. It's my experience. And there is a wondering if these things that are so complicated to describe, can they be offered experientially so everybody can get it? Like the simple-minded people or people who have a brilliant brain or whatever. I mean, through experience, it seems like, to me, it's so much more accessible. So I'm struggling. In other words, I get excited and then I'm struggling again.
Yes. And notice it's between excited and complete disconnect.
Yes.
But there were some moments when you were reading again today that you were excited.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
What were those moments? Notice I'm
those
asking.
moments were a bit like what you were describing, what you say philosophy can do. it opens a whole new way at looking at the world, at myself, at everything. So it opens a new dimension in that moment. And it's not something where it's completely new. It's not like that I feel, oh, I didn't know that before. It's more like a sense of recognition of something that I would have never been able to put into words. More like that.
Let me make sure this is being recorded, because that was so beautifully, that was so beautifully articulated. And I wonder if
It says
somebody,
it's recording.
good. I wonder if somebody could say that back, reflect that back to Amona about the experience when it's exciting.
What I was resonating with when you were talking, Amona, was this sense of, at some point, oh, this is so complicated, and why are you making it more complicated than it is? You're trying to look intelligent or whatever, and then these moments of, oh, when something opens up, when something clicks there, when something makes sense, and not only makes sense, but as you mentioned, putting words to it and describing it in a way that I couldn't have done myself. And then how that, in my experience, is how that, when something really clicked, opens up opens up something new, something fresh, something that can really be carried forward in a different way and thought in a different way. Like it opens, wow, something that was not possible before.
Is that right? Yes. Yes, there's these two sides, and I want to first validate the first side of the one that says you're just making it more complicated to prove how smart you are. And as a young person, I always thought it's these men who are trying to make it seem like they're so intelligent, and women don't talk like that. Of course, times have changed, and philosophy is taught not just by men as it was in the 70s, but there is that feeling, and in the psychoanalytic world, it's actually acknowledged that the language is constructed. This was a quote in a psychoanalytic seminar. It's constructed to be a dialogue of scholars, and basically to keep out the people that weren't scholars. And they aren't allowed to be part of this dialogue. And it can be that feeling in philosophy and in some kinds of theoretical papers that that there's a wall up, and that you're being kept out of the club. And to some extent, there is historic basis for that feeling. I'm only going to talk to you. Of course, all communities have their languages that we don't even notice if it's our community. You know, focusers have their language. You know, can you be friendly to this? When I talk to my psychoanalytic friends that aren't focusers, and I say, can you be friendly to this? They say, what are you talking? What kind of gobbledygook is that? You know? And each community, each political community, each ethnic community, each neighborhood in a way has its own language that is for the in-group, and other people feel kept out of that. I was so lucky to meet Gene Genlin as a young person and experience how he so wanted to bring everybody in and bring the language of philosophy that was so dear to him, you know, to all of us. It was still very problematic to really get that language. It's so similar, I find, to poetry, and that some poets you can read and what are they talking about, and why are they saying it this way? Why don't they just say blah blah blah? You know, so I'll understand it. The other side of it is that if you say it in a direct way, a way that's familiar to everybody, that you talk in your own neighborhood, so to speak, then you are getting the same thing that you've always known and gotten. If you say it in a completely other way that sort of teases your mind, and you can't just take for granted what you've always taken for granted, something either shuts down completely or it opens in a new way. And Amoni, you had both those experiences, something opening in a new way, like, oh, I have to think differently, not just think different thoughts, but think differently to get this. And wow, I get a glimpse of it. And it really is a different process, a different manner of experiencing. And then the other thing of, oh, I don't have time for this. Let these people just say what they want to say to me and get it over with so I can go on with my day, or so I can be excited. I mean, the point is to be touched. The point is to have an enlivened experience. And sometimes you have to sort of have keys to open the locks of the closed doors in order to have that. And that's what we're trying to do in this class, is to give us all some little different keys so that we can get that sense of something opening that's been closed. And sometimes we have to acknowledge our anger at a door being closed before we can say, I'm not going to just stay out because that door is closed. There's good stuff behind that door. I'm going to fight for it, right? I'm going to find the key to that. I want to know what that thing is. And so I'm encouraging you to fight for it a bit. So a couple of things that I want to say to begin with, and then we're going to go to the clinical part and then translate it back, is that when we think about who the person is that's writing, in this case, Gene Genlin, why they're writing this. I mean, sometimes people are writing something just to be smart, to get their PhD or something like that, or to get something in a journal. But many times people are writing because something in them wants to say something that's important to say. What is it that they want to say? And who are they talking to? In this case, with these articles, the theory of personality change and the client's client that we're focusing on today. Jane was really pointing this both at the philosophical community and at the psychological community, more the academic psychological community, right? He was talking to both therapists and philosophers, and that's why these papers, we can get a little edge in there to see what they mean to us. they're sort of crossover papers. And then the other question is, what is the person trying to correct for, or what are they trying to carry forward? And that correct for is an important thing. Is often papers are sort of trying to protest against something and show that it's wrong-headed. And sometimes we don't know what they're protesting, and then it doesn't make any sense to us. So that's another way in there, another key that we can think about. The other thing that I want to say as a key is that we've mentioned how, excuse me, how theory and philosophy is built on terms. It's the scaffold of the way of thinking. And terms can really be problematic because we take them as a something. We take them as if they're standing alone. And the terms are really handles for something. They're just like the handles in focusing. When we come up with our own way of saying something, and then you want to say that back, the fire engine words in focusing. That term opens up a whole larger realm, whole felt sense that you get with the term. You get everything that's beyond, implicitly, you get everything that's beyond that term, and you get a whole world in there. And we need to pay attention to the terms and realize that that it's not just that word. Do you understand it or don't you? And that's where we go to when we think, oh, they're just trying to be smart. What does the term, frozen whole mean? Let me look that up. It means blah. You have to get the whole world that term is pointing at. And to know that a term isn't a reality, a term is a handle for something. Because so many times we are arguing, passionately arguing against a term without realizing that that's just a made up something that's trying to point to something much bigger. And are we really arguing against the something much bigger, or are we arguing against this term that becomes a flag for something, a flag for a community or a way of thinking? So when we think about feeling into a term to see what it means to us, then we have a whole different territory. So that's why focusing can help us to understand philosophy, because we have this amazing process about sensing into something to see what it's made of, to see what it's pointing at, to see what it means to us, to bring it alive. And that makes a complete difference, having this. That's why I'm sort of heartened to invite you into the world of philosophy, because we have this focusing that we can, it's a vehicle to see what there is there. And I think the next module of our essentials of focusing oriented relational psychotherapy will be about TAE for clinicians and using that vehicle of focusing on ideas to see what these ideas mean. I'm considering that. So let me stop here for a second and just like you to take in what I said about some keys to philosophy, something about why it's being written to whom, what it's correcting for, and something about terms, and just see what's there for you about that before we go further into the particular ideas that we're going to explore today. To do that, you might want to go back to your problems with philosophy. Other people who resonate with Amona saying, this is too frustrating. So anything that's there for you.
Then, Marvin, some philosophers or psychoanalytic writers reference others in the past, and others intentionally don't reference anybody. And Gendlin is someone who rarely references anybody. And not referencing anybody has two sides to it. One, it seems like everything you're writing is new or suggests it's new. On the other hand, it seems to discount the other people and discount their contribution to your own thoughts. So I'm wondering about that. And it's a little off-putting to me.
Yeah. I think that there are a number of people beside you, Marvin, that don't like that that Gene doesn't reference other people very much. I mean, he does very often say that he's standing on the shoulders of many others. And I think in the Befindlichkeit paper, he spells that out more, and the whole issue of phenomenology and Heidegger and the pragmatists that he's in line with. I think Gene was very concerned that people not equate what he was saying with something that somebody else had said previously, because he wanted us to get something about a different, what he was calling a different kind of concept. And he didn't want you to say, oh, this is like that. Gene and I would have a lot of discussions about this. I would have the objection that you have, Marvin. And he would say, well, I don't want people to think this is this, because I'm saying something that takes a different kind of way in there through experience rather than tracking the explicit. And but I'm not defending Gene there. I'm saying what I believe was his motivation. But that sometimes makes it harder for us, because we're used to in the intellectual sphere thinking with logic and sequences. This leads to this, leads to this. And of course, we can track Gene's thinking that way, but Gene is trying to bring us into felt sense logic, which is very different. This more than ordered, implicit, and the felt sense that can bring us into that. And so it's a very different way for academics to think than than often is taught. And then the thinking part is different than focusing people, because we're used to the feeling part and not the not the thinking part. And also, you know, Jean came from a tradition with Carl Rogers that was rebelling against psychoanalysis being so cognitively oriented. And so focusing people are often not into the thinking, the aliveness of thinking, although TAE is a wonderful way into that. Anybody else? Just what, anything about this barrier to philosophy? Or anything we've said so far about that? Anything that
Yes,
you need there? Yes.
this is Nathalie. Yeah, what you were
Nathalie.
saying about the terms and how we relate to the terms and what the terms mean to us, and also this dance between what they mean to us and what we think or feel they mean to the person who's using them. Like when Jenlyn says, okay, what do you want this term to mean? So it's this dance between what that term resonates with ourselves, what it is for us, and also trying to find in the context and in everything that they're saying, in this case Jenlyn, what he's wanting this term to mean.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's beautifully said, that we're trying to find what the person here, Jenlyn, wants this term to mean, where he's pointing, where he's sending us, and what it means to us. And it might mean more, it will always mean more to us or different to us. And hopefully, since we're one interaction, we get a lot of what it means to him in there. But both of those, what it means to him and what it means to us, is very, very different than what it means. Right, Amona, do you, does that help with the closed door? When you're looking at what does this mean? Like it has a meaning, and I'm closed out of that. It doesn't mean anything. It's what it means, what Jenlyn is trying to show us it means to him and what it means to us. It's just a handle for something. Thank you, Nati. I'm going to just take one more comment because I want to get into the clinical part and then go back to the philosophy.
Lynn, I'd like to say something keeps coming up to me about the literary criticism of a bunch of words, and how, you know, back to Marshall McLuhan, as the medium is the message.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's something in Jean's style itself that's his message.
Yes, yes, yes. And BJ, what is the message to you in his style? What is it saying to you?
This could change in 5 minutes, but at this moment, when you were giving the examples about when reading something, reminding ourselves who's the audience, what's their message, what are they protesting, with that still kind of in the front of my head, I hear a yearning and an excitement in his writing, that he knows something.
Yes, yes, yes.
And wants to talk about it.
Right. Yes, I love that. He knows something that comes through. It's like he's saying, I know a secret that
Yes.
can
Yes,
fix a lot of things,
yes,
or can a tool that can open lots of stuff, a way of thinking. And I don't want you to just think it's the old thing, because there's something new in here. Right?
yes.
Yes, right. Okay, I think that we're going to change gears for a moment and see if we can get the message of this paper as it speaks to us as therapists and helpers, and then we're going to go back to the philosophy and actually read something. But as our way into it, if somebody can just get ready to put the little nutshell statement that he makes in this personality change paper, we'll read that together as a way into it. But I'm just going to make a couple of introductory remarks about it. Experience. We think that we know what it is to experience. And Jean is saying to us, what is that we mean? And this is very much philosophy, right? What do we mean by? That's a philosophical question. What do we mean? What are we pointing to when we say experience? Is it a closed, shaped, already finished thing? And he's saying, recognizing that experience isn't a thing but a process, that it's an unfolding, but it hasn't been folded in. Jean talks about the new was, that it was like this. Now I see that it was like this. And it's always how the past is alive and changing now, that this whole idea of what he calls a manner of experiencing is essential to understand the project of psychotherapy, or to understand how people change. So he starts this paper with the question, well, how can people change if they're construing reality to protect their way of thinking about it, and they only are picking out the things in the environment that that support their way of thinking, and everything that happens gets funneled into this, right? We all know this problem. How can it change if people are repressing what is most important? I remember Alice Miller saying that the most important parts, or the most significant for therapy parts of a person's childhood, they experience for the first time in therapy. Do you remember that statement? I don't know if that book was so popular when I was a young person, Alice Miller's The Drama of the Gifted Child. And that statement, I remember, just really struck me, that we're having the experience for the first time of important aspects of our childhood in therapy. And Jean is looking, how does that happen? How can you have an experience of your childhood for the first time now? And he talks about that the keys to this that everybody sort of agrees upon, and this was written a long time ago, and everybody agreed, were the elements of feelings and the elements of relationship, that it takes some kind of relationship, important relationship, for people to change. And it takes something that we call feelings for people to change. And he says, well, what is this kind of feelings? And that's where he gets into experience. And what is this kind of relationship? And he tells us in so many ways, but I don't think dramatically enough, that feelings and relationship, maybe he does, I'm going to ask you that. He's saying to us, feelings and relationship are one process. And that's sort of what you were talking about when we first greeted Marvin, that that part in the paper where he's talking about, if I tell something to one person, my experience is going to be all constricted, and then I'm going to wait till I get home by myself to really think about it. And then I have a different thing at home. And then I have a different thing with a person that just opens to it. And in their presence, I can think all kinds of new things, right?
Mm-hmm.
The experience, the feeling experience, and the relationship are one process, not two different processes. And that is something that we can study endlessly as clinicians. You know, how do we have the kind of relatedness that brings the fullness of experience that makes a change? Let's just comment on that for a minute, and then remind me to go back to this issue of change, what change is, okay? You'll remind me? Okay, but let's talk about this for a minute. That Jean is saying that to really understand how people change, we need to understand that what we mean by experience and feelings, and what we mean by relationship, and that these are one process.
Well, then I'm thinking, he doesn't say that clearly enough to me. You started by saying maybe he doesn't say this like sort of big enough, because I've read it recently and I get it, but when you say it, it's like when you read that time and space is the same, and it kind of like, I'm like, oh, what? Like, yeah, but I'm confused. So like feelings and relationship is the same. It's like time and space is the same. Oh, so that's, I just want to say it's like different when you said it this time.
Yes, yes,
Bigger.
yes, thank you. Yes, I'm maybe saying it, I'm saying it bigger, louder, something. It's not that they're the same. It's that I don't experience, or I don't feel, and we're using feeling experience sort of in the same ballpark. It's a feeling experience. Experience is a feeling process. I don't experience inside myself. I'm always experiencing inside a relationship, even if nobody else is there. Even if I was left in the woods at the age of 1 or something, and I'm been grown up by wolves or something impossible, it will be in relation to those wolves, right? Or Jean does that whole thing in the video about interaction first, that we experience inside a relationship always. And our manner of experience is intertwined, embedded in the manner of relating.
I have trouble with and I have trouble even with my trouble. I have trouble and I have trouble with my trouble. In that, just as in studying Buddhism, there's an idea that things went wrong, that this is the pure way, and we have to get back to the garden, as Joni Mitchell put it. The way that we experience things is wrong. It's screwed up. It's pathological. And that's why we have to take these courses and we have to study so hard to find felt sense, and we have to look at philosophy, and we have to work really hard because something has gone really wrong. And I have trouble with that, even as I accept it. I can accept that, capitalism is something that's gone really wrong, and even in a very parallel kind of way, that capitalism has gone wrong in a direction of an individual profiting and the group getting screwed. I could even make a kind of analogy there, that when you're only for yourself and your individual ego and there is no relationship anymore, you've perverted something pure, but it's not working. So now we're trying to correct it. But I have so much trouble with the idea that everybody is experiencing everything in this screwed up way. And now this very rarefied few of us who've gone to college and have advanced degrees are going to somehow see things the right way. There just seems to be something off about that. I don't even know what, but
absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm taking that in.
Oh, I also wanted to say that along the same lines as before, I was shocked to learn, after having heard about Gendlin for 40 years, to learn last year that he was a philosopher. And I think that that's true of many people. They think he's kind of like Carl Rogers, but a little different.
Right. That's why
And I don't think I bring it up because I think it's related to what I'm saying, that it's not, there's like this huge kind of discrepancy between we're going back to this pure form of experiencing, but we're going to do it at the University of Chicago, and we're going to write papers, and Heidegger, and who, is so hard and nobody can understand them. And most of them are male, they're all the boys who do this. Not anymore, I guess. In my day, it was only the boys, almost always the boys who did this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a weird paradox. We're so pure, but it's also so not.
I think I get you, but let me see if I do, because I think you're reading Gendlin as saying that experiencing should be this way, should be relational, right? It should be relational, and that it should be this way and this way.
No, I wouldn't say. I know what you're saying, but I don't know that that's what I'm saying. I understand that you're saying it is, but to even know that, to even really experience it, you have to go through all of these gymnastics to get there.
I think that I feel like I'm defending Gene here. So let me defend him, because I, have a lot of my own protests with the way Gene expresses things also. But here I think that his intent was to bring focusing, what he named focusing, and that's just a name of an inward process that is that people know in tiny villages in many countries that have never heard of psychology. But he wanted to make that accessible to everybody, and did so much to do that. That's why a lot of people don't know that he was a philosopher, because he could talk to anybody and make that process available to them within 10 minutes, mostly. He's not saying that there's a pure form of experiencing. He's sort of looking at it from the other side and saying, well, we know people change. How do they do it? And that's going to help us to help people in their process. And of course, now I can go back to my wanting to look at the word change. What do we mean when we say change? A person comes into therapy because they want to change. What does that mean? Do they want to change? And then people will say, oh, they don't really want to change. You probably know, or some of you older ones probably know that whole series of jokes about what does it take to change a light bulb, and how many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is only one, but the light bulb really needs to want to change, right? What do we mean by change? Does a person change? Let me just hear what you have to say about that. Gene is using the word change in a very different way.
I have two thoughts. Lynn. One, I think it was Winnicott who said, you can't think of a baby, you have to think of a baby in terms of interaction with the mother.
Right.
And the interaction was the critical element.
Right.
Yeah. The other is my struggle with the meaning or the process of experience, because it puts together mental processes, sensorial processes, feeling, touch, and so forth, what we see, what we hear, and the feeling system. It's easier to look at one of those systems and analyze it, and rather than this overarching concept of experience, which combines everything, mixes everything up, so that it seems like a muddle sometimes, and we can't get our hold on it.
Yeah, okay. Let me come back. Let me just say one more thing about change, and then I'll come back to experience. That when Jenlin is talking about a person changing, it's not changing from this to this, changing from being an asshole into changing to being, a fine citizen or something. He isn't talking about the kind of change that often people send their partners to therapy to change. They want the partner to be the different person that they really need. Change for Gene is a very subtle process of, we could feel it. It's something always that we could feel something opening, like we could feel a change, that we could feel we were changed when Amona did the attunement. Something opens, and the way things are might be the same, but one's attitude is a little bit different toward it. One's relationship to it is a little bit different. So we have to look at what we mean by change, which is such an important thing for us therapists, right? You know, is our job to help the person change. And the change is this becoming more oneself, becoming more enlivened in whatever that self. Now I'm speaking now not philosophically, so I have to go back, because if I say enlivened in whatever that self wants, that's my psychological language that you clinicians will understand, but those are very fuzzy words. Change means something coming to life. I think I can say that. Something becoming a more, becoming generative, becoming less stuck. So now we can go back to experience. Marvin is saying that's such a big word. What do we mean by experience? We can take it apart into little aspects, a sensory experience, the intellectual dimension, the cognitive aspect. You know, we can do that. Would that help? But really, experience is what a person, what a person is living. And the life of that person in that moment, the life that's there, is what we're looking at, you know, and that we're calling experience. Does anybody else have another way of saying what experience is? You know, we'll say, what's going on for you right now? Or how is that for you right now? We're pointing at something.
I think when I read, I'm sorry.
Oh, we have two people. Good.
Oh, okay. I think when I have read this, reading this article, like it keeps coming up, like Endlin says something a number of times in different ways, and it almost looks the same, but it's embedded in something else. And I think what kept coming up for me in the idea of experience, that it's always to do with relating to the other. Like it's just, I mean, I know we've said this a lot, the interaction, but somehow it hit me differently this time, because like, I'm always feeling like, there's supposed to be this big change or this big aha all the time, either with my clients or with myself. But there's just something so subtle in Gene's writing that he doesn't seem to go for the big aha. It's like he goes for that subtle piece that's happening right now in the present. He's always talking about what's going on right now. Yes, there's the past and that can come in, but what am I feeling right now as I'm talking with you, Lynn, with the group? What's coming up? Right. And I feel a sense of coming alive. Like, I love that word, you know.
Let me say that back, Dorothy, and then I want to get what Jonathan was going to say. So experience to you is what's coming up. Notice this coming up is a metaphor, and that philosophy helps us to notice these things. it's a metaphor. Nothing is coming up, right? But we think of this emergence. Even the word emergence is a kind of coming up. It's coming to mind. It's coming from implicit to explicit. It's thinkable. It's noticeable what's coming up right now with you. And it's always a kind of right now with you. It's always a right now with you, even when we're completely alone. And the with you might be a you that's the voice of someone, metabolized voice of someone in me. But that the past comes in. When you say the past comes in, the past and the future are in this moment. It's not that, oh, we're going to stop talking about the here and now and let the past come in. The past is right here, and the past is always new. The past is always what we're experiencing now. And the past can always change. We can always change the past in our experience right now, because we're not talking in the world of facts. This happened, that happened. We're talking in the world of processes and what comes alive, how it comes alive, and what it does, this carrying forward world. I want to hear from Jonathan, and then I want to say something about what Jean is correcting for. Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm just reminding myself that.
Yes. Okay. I can feel a whole implicit something, and I'll see if I can try to see if that crests into a explicit. I'm connecting all the things that we're talking about. I'm still very moved or something by the comment that I don't see your name on the screen now, but you were talking about like, oh, we're in our academic like Jean needs us to learn to experience the right way or something.
Liz said that.
Thank you. And I almost see how Jenlin is having that attitude of, or like the thing that he's correcting for is that imposed authoritarian something. And I think back to a childhood, I'm reading this parenting book, and like even kids have a clear sense of those tiny somethings being right or not. So as an, like, let's see if this example works. If like a kid's like, I don't want pancakes. It's like, and then the parent says like, but pancakes are your favorite food. It's like, no pancakes. There's like the way that we're used to relating habitually is having some authoritarian something, like a parent saying, well, no, your favorite food is pancakes, therefore you should want to eat pancakes here. But there's a whole rich something in that kid's experience where there's something about pancakes that is just not right. And if the parent says something as simply as like, oh, you really don't want pancakes right now? Like, yeah, and just starts eating the pancakes. Like in the old way, there's this authoritarian logicness of how that makes no sense and how the kid should just eat his pancakes or listen to his mom and it's almost like Jen Lin has a critique of like that kind of authoritarianness, whether it's a therapist to a client or a parent to a child, that, well, you should, like in the explicit model, this should make sense or something. But it's really those tiny little like things that Dorothy and Lynn were just talking about. It's those tiny little moves that are kind of below that edge of awareness. And I think Gendlin is kind of like saying the ivory tower way of it is some way and this is how it is and this everything else doesn't make sense. He's trying to break that all down and saying the kid is actually right. Like the kid knows. And it's less like let's change the way we need to do something and more of like, no, the kid knows what he's talking about. And yeah, there's something there that feels really important for me that
You see the logical the imposition of linear logic as a kind of authoritarian pushing down. I loved all your hand motions, pushing down and oppressing the implicit of the child. And I think that is one thing that Jean is talking about. It's the experience, right? It's the experience that isn't linear, rational, logical in this explicit way, that there's something much more there that the parent needs to be interested, or we need to be interested in the child in ourselves that doesn't want to eat the pancake. Why don't you want to read philosophy? You love philosophy, right? Oh, you should love philosophy. You're going to be a coordinator. You better love philosophy, right? It's welcoming the experience. And Jean is saying the experience is something so much more than concepts. And the experience is something that has to do with this implicit web of connections that goes way out there, that's more than we can think. And if we're tuning into that we call experience, then that makes the experience much more alive for the person. So the parent says, oh, no pancakes. I'm so surprised. Maybe the kid would say, yeah, no pancakes. And then the kid might think, yeah, I didn't like the ones I had yesterday. Or there's something I didn't like about that, or something. It will go further. It's that furthering of the relation, the kind of relation makes the manner of experience more alive or more constricted. And that's his main message.
But Lynn and Jonathan, I didn't think the kids' comment was about pancakes at all. It was
Right.
what was underneath the pancakes.
Right, that's what we're saying, right? It's not about the content. And this is a very, very important point that he's correcting for, that we pace, there's a place where he says it, and I won't take our time to share the screen, but there's a place where he says so beautifully, we get so involved in the content when we're talking about personality change or how we help people or experience. And the content becomes this rigidified thing. And he's correcting for that, paying attention to the content rather than the manner of experiencing. And I love that he's doing that. I want to give you a couple of examples. I don't know if you share them, but it's this belief that if we know the content, if we know the facts, that somehow we're going to put them together in a logical way, and we're going to do something for the person to help them. And that's sort of an old way of thinking. And I remember supervision groups, some of which I led, where somebody would presenting, and they would give the person was born this time to this mother, this father, and the grandmother was doing this, and then the uncle and the aunt were doing that, and then at 5 years old this happened, and then the person was reported to have this experience when, not even this experience, to have this when they were 8, and the patient reported that blah blah blah, and this would all be in the, by the time you got to what the person was dealing with that was presenting the case, you were completely lost. So when I got into the habit in supervision groups of saying, give me the punchline first, you know, what's happening now that you're having trouble with, who's saying what to who, and what are you feeling, and then you can give me the background. And that was my way of trying to say, it's not the content, it's what's going on in the experience now. Another example would be these psychoanalytic papers that I would and do read, with brilliant associations going on like a mystery story of this happened and this association and this and back to that. And the person makes this brilliant interpretation, and then the client gets better. And you have no idea what the client experienced with all of this, or what the client said when the therapist said the brilliant interpretation. You know, this is what Jean is correcting for, is this gap between experience and what he's calling content, what he's calling all of these explicit things. And what matters is what we're experiencing, and what we're experiencing is what we're experiencing that's always within the larger of what's of the relational dynamic in the moment. Does that all make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes.
Oh,
He gives some some ways of talking about the kind of experiencing process that leads to change. Not saying we should have this pure thing, but looking back and saying this leads to change, and the kind that doesn't. And we all know that that's something very familiar to us, that the kind of experience that somebody is having, the manner of experience that they're having, that leads to something changing in this moment, opening up an aliveness, is all those things we learn in focusing, right? There's a kind of energy in it. Words are used in a new way. There's a feeling of exploring with something new happening. And the kind of experience, we could go on about that, and I gave you a little handout about that. The kind of experience that doesn't lead to change, I'm recognizing how often people need to vent. They need to vent, but the venting doesn't lead. You need to get something off your chest, but it doesn't lead to anything changing. It's not like you get it off your chest and then it's not there on your chest. Maybe if you're venting and somebody is really interested not in the content of what you're venting about, but in your upsetness, in your dysregulation, in your need for support, then something can settle in you. Do you know that experience? This paper leads us to looking at the manner of experience, but then also the manner of our relating that is an endemic part of this manner of experience. I need a comment that back to make sure that I got that across, and then I'm gonna go a step further and give you an example.
Lynn, I wonder if I might offer an example that's very
Thank you.
personal.
Thank you.
I realize it was like 50 years ago. After a lot of looking since I was 15 for a good therapist, I found one. And he was known to be very hard on people and really crack the whip. And I went in there and I really liked the feeling around him. I'd actually met him once and I just felt good around him. And he said, and I liked his office, everything about it. And he said, what brings you here? And I said, I'm very rebellious. I don't follow rules. I get in trouble all the time. I need somebody who will be very hard on me. And I think that's you. And he said, I think you need somebody that'll be very soft on you. And I can feel it now. I just felt everything. I realize now it was an enormous felt sense, like now we can start.
Oh, wow.
And I stayed for 20 years. So.
Wow, that's a beautiful example. There's a contradiction in a way that what Beth was talking about was, I need this and you're the one. And he's saying he is being hard on her in the sense that he isn't saying, oh, okay, I'm going to give you homework and I'm going to help you not to be rebellious. He is contradicting her, but in the contradiction, he's saying, I really get where you're coming from. I really get you.
He's talking to the implicit in her. The part
Right.
that's not being explicitly said, but that's there and needs to be heard and embraced and held.
Thank you, Arlene. Yes, right.
My favorite part about that is that, Beth, you were saying how you were so drawn to everything about him in his space. So that one in you knew that what it needed, but the words it had were, I need you to be hard on me. But there's that bigger one or something that knew that it's whatever he would give that isn't that, but is, yeah.
Right. It isn't taking the words hard on me literally, right? The content. He was taking that hard on me was a handle, a term, right? If we want to say that, use term in a personal way. And he was getting the felt sense of that, what that meant, and being on its side, as Jean talks about. Listening to the voice under the words rather than the words. So this leads me to giving a principle that is in Jean's psychotherapy work that I think illustrates this concept, the concepts in this paper. He talks about it's not the saying, what we say to the client or what the client says to us. It's the doing in the saying. So he's saying that what leads to change isn't the content, it's the process, right? It's what we're doing, and that the experience that we're having, that we're making together, is a doing. It's a constant doing. It's an event, as he calls it, an event. And so the example that he uses, and I might have even quoted this before, is that if the therapist is saying, actually, Beth, your example is a very good one of this. The therapist is saying, you need to be more assertive. You need to stand up for yourself to the client. The saying is that the therapist is encouraging the person to come out, right, of themselves. And the doing is that the therapist is telling the client what to do. It's the same old thing. And that we aren't even aware, and this paper is trying to help us to be aware that it isn't the content, it isn't what we're saying, it's how that content is serving what we're doing together. So Beth's therapist was doing an important thing. It was saying, I'm with you. I'm on your side. I hear your need, in a way, on the side of the rebellious part.
And I have a question.
Sure.
Would you go as far to say that it's not the content, or would you say not only? So looking at your example of you need to stand up for yourself. Let's say another thing the therapist also says, like, you need to make sure you take care of your physical health and eat enough food. I imagine the one that where the therapist has that kind of down you should and then says you should stand up for yourself holds a more contradictory dissonance, that it would have me feel more of a something being off than the food one. So in that kind of case, it feels like it's the content is also important or something.
It's not that the content isn't important. It is something about that the content is in the service of what we're doing, and that we're often not aware of the relational piece that is the main communication in the feelings. So if the therapist is saying, you should take care of yourself, right? Make sure you're taking care of yourself, right? Was that right? Then
Yeah.
what's being the doing could be many things, but one thing the doing might be the therapist being the parent in that moment and guiding, or the doing might be, and it so much has to do with the tone, with what's happening in the moment, what the doing is. The therapist being concerned for the patient, wanting to encourage. The same words can mean many, many different things. Does that answer that?
Maybe I'll try to say it kind of tangential, but it's like I just heard you say it's not the content. It sounds like, I imagine it's more like it's mainly not the content, but it's still a little bit the content.
Oh yes, it's it's I don't want to say it's not the content. I want to say that we need to look at what that the content is not a reality, a thing, a fact. I want to say that the content is pointing at an experience, that the content is our way of processing an experience, and that the that putting an experience into words is deepening and enriching the experience. So we need to be able to put experience into words in order for it, as Jean would say, to carry forward, to open up, to be enriched. Yes, the content is, the words are important, but we want the words to be as connected as they can to the experience. And we're trying to work on that in this group, right? We're trying to make our words connected with an experience of the philosophy. I want us to read together, if somebody has it, the little paragraph that I said, that I sent you. Would somebody read this for us?
I can.
Thank you.
A theory of experiencing. What do we mean by feeling? The difference between merely and really. Genlin develops a method for helping the merely become really. His message in a nutshell. In psychotherapy, therefore, the situation is not that first we figure out what is wrong with an individual and how he must change, and then somehow he does it. Rather, his experiencing with us is already vitally different with us than it previously could be. From this different experiencing arise the solutions of his problems. The changes are already occurring as he speaks. Our responses, as verbal symbols and as events, interact and carry forward his experiencing. Our gestures and attitude, the very fact that he is talking to us, the differences which each moment he makes to us, all of this interacts concretely and with what implicitly functions in him, his felt experiencing.
Thank you. Okay, let's come back together. Let's just take that in for a minute. What comes to you from that?
Can I say something?
Sure.
There's something very mechanistic and like a default that I sort of, it's like my reference that, oh, I need to do this, I'm going to do this to do this, you know, or somebody will tell me what to do. And then if I just do that, it's really what we're talking about, dealing with the substance instead of kind of the implicit or the interaction where everything occurs. And so although I don't fully grasp how all of that happens or that it happens, I believe it does happen. And it's not the way we think it is. So often people are talking about what the problem is and if only this one would change or behave differently or this could happen, but really that's not what's at issue. It's really something in the feeling realm or in the meaning of what's happening, and there's something needed in the relating that must occur, that can occur with the therapist and the client or in some kind of reparative relationship.
Right. Yes, thank you, Rachel. That the client may be saying, the content might be saying, if only this person would do this, or this person is always doing this, I'm so upset and frustrated. And the therapist can easily join in the content, especially if the content is very dramatic. And the content is important, as Jonathan is saying. But it's the manner of our experiencing with the person that makes the difference between what Jean calls, merely and really. They're merely lamenting, or they're really expressing, finding words for what's so present for them. and our way of being with them, and beyond the content, whatever the situation is, to the feeling process that's moving on, expecting the change moment by moment by moment. That is what will be most therapeutic, Jean is saying.
Just one thing, Lynn, when you were earlier describing change as defined differently by Jean than maybe the usual concept, what also comes to my mind is how he talks about, well, a lot of times in the focus, amongst focusers, what we forget is, what about the phone call? Are we making the phone call that needs to be made? So, and then we feel so good about all this and how it feels, and then we forget about the phone call. And so he, in one place, he says, well, I think he says it's like a car engine running without really actually letting the car drive. So he actually does emphasize on take the step. Like, it's not just how I feel about something all the time. A lot of times it is about taking a step. The change step.
Yes. Yeah, a change step. A change step needs to come from a change that is a change in relation to the thing. If a change step comes from the explicit selves, the saying you need to take care of yourself, do this, that make that phone call. I mean, that also will lead to something there, but the change will be in what makes you able to make that phone call, and the remembering, no, don't forget about that, take the action step, is in the change. It's not the result. It's not saying I'm going to change and then I'm going to lose 10 pounds, or I'm going to finish my dissertation, or that will be, but it's in the ability to act in the moment is a difference in a manner of experiencing. Do you see what I mean there, Mona?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
that making the phone call is an experience. It's not that the experience leads to a change and the change is the making the phone call. It's that making the phone call is part of that whole step-by-step opening out and experiencing differently. And sometimes you can, it's the interaction with the phone call there that is making a different manner of experiencing.
Yes.
It's sort of less about a particular result, like when people will refer to, oh, the client said that this was their goal in therapy, so I have to bring them back to that goal. They said they wanted to lose 10 pounds, let's say. So I have to remind them of that. They're repressing that. It's not what you say the goal is, and then you're reaching. Well, the insurance companies, at least here in the States, want us to be, this is the goal, and then we do this and we get this. That's the progress. But it's more that the experiencing is different moment by moment, leading to some sense of being more alive and more oneself. And that's always a surprise. I mean, one of the things that Jean talks about is that we only know change in retrospect, the steps of change. We can't say, I want to change this way, this way, this way. I mean, we can say that, and then that's in the interaction in the moment. But we can only really tell what's changed as we look back and say, well, this led to this, and that's a wonderful thing to do, to take each step and to say how it led. to the next, and to the next, and to the next. So we're going to have to stop. Yeah,
Oh.
yes, Amoni.
Sorry, can I say that back to see if I got it clearly?
Yes, yes, thank you.
I was really thinking about what you were saying. And so it would be something like, I can make the phone call because in the relationship that was going on there, something something happened in my experiencing of that situation, and I'm living my bodily living of that situation has changed or is changing, and that allows me, that is what would allow me to make that phone call. Is that what you were saying? Did I understand correctly?
Yes, yes. And that our relationship with the other, which might be the other that we're right with, or the other that is within us at that moment with us, and the relationship with ourselves, with the one in there, is one process. So as my relatedness changes with you moment to moment, it's going to change with my client's client. So the client's client may have been rebelling against making the phone call or feeling overwhelmed by it, and then feel like eating the pancakes, like, oh, okay, I can make this phone call because I'm being listened to. So that those all go together. It isn't that we get then the result, and that the change step is something separate than our experiencing. It's the reward, it's the fruit, and we're waiting for this fruit. We want to make applesauce. Where are the apples already? It's like all along we're being nourished by steps of change in relation to our experiencing of ourselves, as well as the world, as well as the other.